was not nervous until about like 20 minutes ago, so you'll have to excuse me. Some of you may be wondering why it is that I'm standing here in front of you to talk about diversity. For all outward appearances, I am completely not diverse. In fact, my friend once told me that I was the whitest white person that he knows. Admittedly, I've been called a lot of things over the years, but being called dangerous was one of the best compliments that I've ever received. It's not a word that's usually used as a compliment, and I think that's part of the reason why I liked it. I was a 1L, and I had just successfully answered a cold call for the second time in a row. My answer was perfect, according to my professor, and I was dangerous for knowing it. I felt proud, mostly because in that moment I knew that I was going to make it through law school, which was good news considering that being a lawyer was the only career I had ever wanted, unless you count my adolescent dreams of being a dancer or a gymnast or a veterinarian. The next memory I have of that class is sitting in my seat and staring at my open casebook, panicking. Before arriving at class that evening, I had completed my reading assignments, jumped in the shower, and then driven an hour to Hartford. But there I was, just staring at my casebook and panicking because I had no recollection of ever seeing the case we were about to discuss. It didn't even look vaguely familiar. I also began noticing that it was becoming harder for me to study. It wasn't that I didn't have time, because I had plenty of time, but I had little concentration, at least to study law. Mostly I would spend the day daydreaming or memorizing Iggy Azalea's rap solo from the song Problem. It actually makes for a decent party trick, so all was not lost. I would go to class at night and pray that I wouldn't get called on. Writing papers was especially onerous. On one occasion, I was so paralyzed with anxiety over completing what was only a 2-page paper that I found myself sitting on my knees, my head resting on the floor, and my body awash in stress hormones. Things got worse from there. I had already been diagnosed with anxiety and ADD, but I hadn't taken medication for those things in quite a while. So I began taking medication again. But this time the medication didn't seem to help, and in fact it seemed to make me worse. This anxious feeling kept building inside of me to the point where it was the only thing I could focus on. On one occasion, I had to call my sister to talk me down. I don't recall what she said to me, but I clearly remember that I called her from the woods behind my house, and I was worried about what the neighbors would think if they saw me there, talking on a cell phone, sitting in the middle of the woods. I would later find out that the medication I was taking can be activating, meaning that it can contribute to adverse psychiatric events, like developing bipolar disorder, especially if you have a family history, which I do. The story of my downward spiral, bipolar diagnosis, and recovery is a colorful one. I like to think that it's part travelogue, part crime story, set in locations between Brooklyn and Boston, involving missing persons, classified information, and a cappella singing in unlikely places. But perhaps somewhat disappointingly, that is not the story I'm here to tell you today. I'm saving the good stuff for my character and fitness interview. Instead, I want to talk to you today about stigma. There are a lot of jokes about bipolar disorder, almost as many jokes as there are about lawyers. This is one of my favorites. Bipolar? I prefer emotionally action-packed. Here's another popular one. When someone keeps changing their mind about something, like when your spouse or significant other can't decide what to eat for dinner and they keep changing their mind, turn to them, smile, and say, "Are you bipolar?" I've heard that joke before, most recently by one of my classmates. The joke was directed at our professor after he kept changing an assignment. My classmate and my professor found the joke amusing, at least as evidenced by their shared laughter. I don't know if anyone else in the class was laughing, because I was hyper-focused on this one student and my professor, their enjoyment playing in my head like a sitcom laugh track. It was as if they could not fathom the possibility that a person with bipolar disorder might be among them. I felt really angry because they were laughing at me, but I also felt relieved because they didn't know that they were laughing at me. Other people have denied my membership in this socially stigmatized group. There was the taxi driver charged with bringing me to therapy who, upon learning my destination, stated, "Have you seen the people coming out of that place?" And when I returned to school, I was greeted with, "You don't look like there's anything wrong with you." I too have denied my own membership in this group, at least outwardly. In fact, until recently, I referred to my status as a law school student as my "I am not crazy" card. And I was really glad to have this card handy should anyone ever suspect that I was, in fact, crazy. But people with bipolar disorder are not overly emotional. We are not indecisive. We are not incapable of successful attendance at law school by virtue of our diagnoses. I grew up in the 80s, and I'm a huge fan of John Hughes. You might have heard of him. Among other films, he wrote and directed a movie called The Breakfast Club. And it's a story about a group of high school students in Saturday detention. Each student belongs to a different high school clique, and they mostly don't associate with each other, but they all become friends through their shared experience during detention. Towards the end of the movie, they discuss what will happen to their newly formed friendships come Monday. The scene is titled, "Are We Still Friends on Monday?" And in a way, I feel like we're all in Saturday detention here together. We're here for a common purpose today and this week, that is to celebrate diversity. But what happens Monday? Thank you for listening.